Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, or ASIRT, has cleared 2 RCMP officers in the shooting death of 15-year-old Haas Lightning Saddleback. The youth was shot several times in Wetaskiwin in August of 2024. Their investigation concluded that the officer believed that Lightning Saddleback had a gun in the backpack he was holding and pointing at him. It says that the officer fired several shots after repeated warnings to put his hands up, but the 15-year-old continued to approach with his arm raised with the backpack on it. Lightning Saddleback died on the scene. No gun was found. APTN will bring you more reaction to this decision in the coming days. A new report is out that says geography limits the access to justice in Northern Ontario communities when it comes to sexual assaults. The survivors group She Matters released its report earlier this week. According to co-researcher Patty Derbyshire, survivors have little to no access to sexual assault evidence kits or forensic exams, and that fewer Indigenous women report their assaults due to a deep mistrust of and systemic racism in the healthcare and criminal justice systems. Derbyshire says one recommendation is a community-based approach by having continuous access to culture in the healthcare system.
So the other part of this idea of a community-first model is also inviting knowledge holders and some of those matriarchs into medical schools, so that this idea of relationship first, of folks being able to bring culture as protective and as reparative is really well understood by young nurses, physicians, even the clerks who are doing the intake in care facilities and hospitals. So important.
Last month, you may remember APTN spoke with Big Stone Cree Nation Chief Andy Aylook in Treaty 8 territory in Alberta. He talked about the economic prosperity and new investments in the community, such as a new school and housing. He criticized the federal and provincial governments for not responding quickly enough during this summer's wildfire, which destroyed dozens of structures on the nation. He also told APTN that he intended to run again for chief in next year's elections. On Wednesday afternoon, the band issued a release indicating that Chief Aylook had submitted his resignation. The resignation was accepted by council. However, no reason was given for the chief's resignation, and no reasons were given for the council's acceptance of it. We'll continue following this story in the coming days. The Nunavut Departments of Education and Transportation, along with Infrastructure Nunavut, held public information sessions on the future of Iqaluit elementary schools. As Justin Hardy tells us, the discussion sought input on the best path forward for 2 schools in Iqaluit and 1 school in neighboring Apex.
Educators, parents, and concerned community members were gathered for each of the input sessions. Top of mind for many coming into the discussion were worries of amalgamation, combining some of the schools in the district. Presenters said these concerns were also brought forward at last year's input sessions.
And as a result of that feedback, we determined that those 2 options were essentially non-viable. We've taken them off the table.
Throughout each input session, those in attendance had lots of opportunity to ask questions and voice their concerns. One community member, Kathy Hansen, says one of her concerns was possible locations for new schools that are one of the options being looked at.
Where option 1, 2, and 3 were going to be. I was a little bit worried about one of the options being close to the hotel where there's a bar.
Department of Education Capital Planning Manager Barry Korthwaite says he's happy with how the consultants handled the sessions.
Most of them got the questions answered. The ones that weren't answered, there were takeaways. And I know the consulting team will adjust with the questions they weren't able to answer and adjust it moving forward when they actually develop the business case.
While she did get her questions answered, Hansen says she's concerned with how accessible the sessions were.
I'm a little bit worried about the the way they answered about reaching out to the elders, especially for Inuit Kawyamajitokangit, and a lot of our elders are caretakers of younger children.
The feedback gathered from these community sessions will be combined with data collected last year to help build the plan for the future of elementary schools in the district. Justin Hardy, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
The Manitoba bill to detain people high on drugs causing public disturbances for up to 72 hours passed Wednesday evening. Some say the quick turnaround for the bill, first tabled at the beginning of October, still has room for improvement and might not be effective. Sav Jonesa reports.
Manitobans publicly high on drugs may be detained for up to 3 days now that a new bill was passed in the provincial legislature on Wednesday. Bill 48, or the Protective Detention and Care of Intoxicated Persons Act, mainly hopes to address the meth crisis affecting the province. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew says intoxicated people will be detained when they are, quote, causing a problem in the community.
The person who is too caught up in their addiction to be able to take care of themselves is no longer going to decide how safe the rest of the community is. Instead, the rest of the community is going to step up, get them the treatment that they need, but most importantly say, we're taking back our streets, we're taking back our communities, we're taking back our bus stops, and we're going to make Manitoba safe again.
Alongside the bill comes a new detox facility in Winnipeg's downtown core where people will be held, assessed by healthcare professionals, and offered addiction support. The Conservative opposition scrutinized its location, which is across the street from a school, but Kinew says it should be open as soon as late November and will have 20 holding units to start.
The conditions of the existing facility where the police take somebody when they're acting up like this, it's pretty rough. The new facility is going to be more humane, more dignified, but most importantly, it's going to be somewhere where somebody who's causing problems on drugs can be taken so that they're not in the emergency room waiting room. They're not at the bus stop. They're not bugging you while you're trying to go to the grocery store.
Kinew and Manitoba's addictions minister, Bernadette Smith, say the 72-hour maximum confinement at the facility is necessary for individuals under the influence of methamphetamines, as the substance takes longer to leave their system. Those brought to regular detention centers will not be held longer than 24 hours. Leah Gazan is the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg Centre, the area where the facility and most of Winnipeg's unhoused population resides, of which 71% say they use substances like meth, according to the 2024 Street Survey by End Homelessness. She has concerns on whether Bill 48 is charter compliant and worries some officers may detain people who are not on meth because it requires saliva or urine to test, unlike alcohol with breathalyzers.
So how do you determine, if you're not a trained psychiatrist or somebody with a psychiatric training, whether the person's behavior is attributed to, again, meth, a psychotic episode, or a bipolar disorder?
She says some community organizations have raised issues with the bill stigmatizing people who use drugs.
I think this is a very complex issue, but the reality is we know carceral approaches and forced treatment through ample research are ineffective. Forced treatment doesn't work. We need to deal with the root causes of this issue.
Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We're always looking for your feedback or story ideas. Here's how you can continue the conversation with us. If you have a story you would like to share, you can send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. You can also find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Time for a quick break, and then our Truth and Politics panel will weigh in on the budget and more of this week's news. Stick around. Welcome back. Reaction to Prime Minister Mark Carney's first budget seems generally mixed, although many Indigenous leaders have expressed their disappointment. Proposed budget cuts to Indigenous Services Canada and Crown Indigenous Relations also turned out to be much smaller than initially predicted. The Liberal budget is our topic for this week's Truth in Politics panel. Also this week, reaction to Premier Wab Kinew's reaction to a Supreme Court of Canada ruling rejecting mandatory minimum sentences for those accessing or possessing child pornography. Joining me now is Niigaan Sinclair, a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Niigaan, good to see you as we've perhaps messed up some flights, time zones, meetings, and everything else here today. But I guess we'll start with your initial reaction to this so-called generational budget.
Well, I mean, it's not really as transformational as perhaps advertised. In fact, it very much looks very similar to a Stephen Harper budget. High investment within military, a big cut in civil service, and then, of course, this big, huge commitment to the Major Projects Office. There's lots to say about this budget, but for those of us, of course, here are speaking about the ways it will impact Indigenous communities, we're looking at approximately $2 billion of cuts to Indigenous Service Canada, Crown Indigenous Relations. That's bad, but then you look at there is going to be some significant investments on water, almost exactly the amount that they're looking to cut in those departments. And then, of course, there is a huge investment within the North. The North is getting a university, Inuit Nunagamat. Congratulations to all the North, all those who've been struggling for years to try to get a university to support young people in that area of the world. And of course, all the different ways in which free, prior, and informed consent is now going to be part of the budget. Just the fact that language, and I commend APTN, all the reporters who picked up on that difference in language. The government's been resisting that for quite a while and is now put it within writing. So that says that that's what the chief's been asking for quite a long time. Certainly would have reduced all the conflict in the summer if they agreed to put that in. The one thing I would just say is that there is continually a commitment to consultation, billions and billions of dollars to be committed to create consultation projects for these major projects that are going to be impacting First Nations. Let's be clear, that money is not going to First Nations. That money will be mostly going to non-Indigenous consultants. If anything, will be those consultants that work with First Nations. It will go to people who generally do not invest much in First Nations. They tend to profit off them. And that's not being mean, that's simply a fact. And so I think there's a kind of a tricky language that goes throughout the budget that's both negative and positive.
Niigaan, moving on to something back here in Manitoba, and a lot of media coverage and online reaction to what Premier Wab Kinew had to say when reacting to a Supreme Court ruling that mandatory minimums would be unconstitutional for people caught possessing or accessing child pornography. He said pedophiles should not only go to jail, but, quote, they should be buried under the prison. You wrote a column about this. Maybe you'd like to elaborate on that.
Yeah, he also said that those who are found guilty of possessing child pornography, he used a term that is often used in prisons as a term that's called Skinner, which is often a very derogatory term to describe people who are sex offenders in prison. And if you know anything about the kind of street justice or criminal justice or jail justice that takes place within those kinds of frameworks, these are not pretty. These are violent acts that it was a little surprising for the Premier to talk about this, but the important thing to know is that he is an intergenerational survivor of child abuse. He himself not, but he has spoken freely about his father. I also am an intergenerational sex abuse survivor, and so what that means is that we, when it comes to this issue, there isn't a lot of reasonability when it comes to it, because for 150 plus years, Canada has been allowing people who have been predatory behaviors on children often to go free. People who then were rewarded with accolades by churches, institutions, schools, governments. And so for a long period of time, predators were not found guilty or held to account in any way. And so I'm not surprised that the Premier would be perhaps referring to a kind of street-level justice for people who are abusing children. The question is whether this was the time or the place in which to make that argument in relation to a Supreme Court ruling.
Right. One last thing here, Nigan, we wanted to touch on a somber anniversary, no doubt for your family, but for many in the Indigenous community this week.
Oh, it's more or less just a big thanks and a big miigwech to everybody for all the great love and sending support our way to our family. I have 4 sisters, and my sisters and I hear all of your messages talking about our father. We can say his name now without any worry that traditionally and culturally he will want to come back and support us from the spiritual realm. Murray Sinclair Iban, Mijanagijik Iban, he loved everyone so much that he went to every single one of your halls, your churches, your gathering spaces, your community centers, your chief and council offices, your convention centers. He went to everywhere that he was invited because he loved this country so much. And I know how much everyone is missing him. It is 1 year now since he began that journey to the West. And so we're missing him very much. But at the same time, we're also extremely grateful and very happy for his life, but also very happy to see the way in which the country continues to remember him, continues to honor him. There's going to be a number of schools named after him. Canada Post, if they survive this strike, will be creating a stamp, we understand, to be able to honor him. We also know all of the great work that we've created because of all the donations that have come in. We've collected several hundreds of thousands of dollars of donations in his name from Canadians, from Indigenous peoples, and we're setting up a scholarship fund at a school that will be named after him in his hometown, my hometown of Selkirk. And so we'll be setting all of those things up as well. We're very excited, and big miigwech and thanks to everybody for sending such a cacophony of love, all the messages, all the social media sort of tributes to him this past week. We really appreciate it.
Wow, great stuff there, Nigan. Appreciate you being with us this week as always, and safe travels. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks so much.
Still to come here tonight, previews of Nation to Nation and this week's APTN Investigates. Stay with us. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And for those in Winnipeg last night, you may have seen the amazing light show in the evening sky. Thanks to Tanisha Wood for capturing this incredible shot of the Northern Lights. If you have an amazing photo, send it to share@aptn.ca. The chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, cloudy and 4 for Fredericton, 7 for Halifax. -2 with snow in Kuujjuaq, flurries and +3 for Nain. 5 in Montreal, 3 with showers for Val-d'Or. Rain and 6 in Sault Ste. Marie, showers and 5 for Ottawa. Sun's out and +3 for Thunder Bay, -2 under sunny skies in Sioux Lookout. -7 for God's Lake, 4 below in Thompson. +2 with the sun out in Winnipeg, -2 in Dauphin and Brandon. +1 and cloudy for Regina, cloudy and -2 for Saskatoon. -6 for Buffalo Narrows, 5 below in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, -4 for High Level and for Fort Chipewyan. -1 in Edmonton, sunny and +9 in Lethbridge. 10 for Vancouver, Victoria, and Kamloops. 5 in Prince George, cloudy and 4 for Smithers. -13 in Old Crow, 2 below for Whitehorse. -6 in Yellowknife, -5 with flurries in Norman Wells. 5 below in Sax Harbor, -11 in Inuvik. -4 in Chesterfield, 2 below with snow in Whale Cove. -17 in Resolute, -2 for Iqaluit. Over to our Ottawa studio now, where Nation to Nation host Karen Pugliese has a preview of tonight's episode.
So coming up tonight on Nation to Nation, as we all know, reaction to the 2025 budget is split. The National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations says this budget may actually set First Nations back. But meanwhile, the Métis are pretty happy. So we're going to be speaking with one of Canada's leading economists to break down the numbers. And Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Golnasty is joining us. She's going to address questions around multi-year funding. That's coming up in a few minutes, right after the news.
Thanks, Karen. The population of Pavernatuk, Quebec, is booming, but their water infrastructure is breaking. For years, the Inuit community has had water shortages, and exclusive documents obtained by APTN show that a permanent solution might be a pipe dream. This week on an all-new episode of APTN Investigates, video journalist Tom Fenario does a deep dive into the water crisis in Nunavik. Here's a preview.
With a population of over 2,100, Pavernatuk is the largest Inuit community on the Nunavik side of the Hudson Bay, and the second largest in all of Nunavik. About 2/3 of folks here are under the age of 30. For years, their population has been booming. There's a lot of kids playing in the streets. And because of the lack of housing here, a lot of overcrowded houses when they go home for dinner. Infrastructure everywhere is struggling to keep up. So the family house has an important role to play when it can stay open.
It was a sad moment for our community members who come here to do activities, because we were forced to be closed for a whole month to help with the emergency state.
In May, a state of emergency was called to combat a water crisis. Not only was there a boil water advisory for 3 months, some people went days, even weeks, without running water in their homes.
We had to even take snow from outside to do our own dishes, to wash our hands, even to deliver water to the elders. Some of them were saying, I've been thirsty, so I need water delivered. Once you're so used to having water to this day, it's very hard not to have it.
And you can catch APTN Investigates Pipe Dreams, the water crisis in Pavernatook, airing this Saturday on APTN at 6:30 Eastern Time. Tom Fenario will also join us for tomorrow's newscast to tell us more about this weekend's episode. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. You can find much more over on our website, aptnnews.ca. And be sure to join Creason here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for your first look at Friday's news. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy Miigwech, thanks for being with us. Stick around. Karen's up next with Nation to Nation. Have a great night.